In the turbulent era known as the Great Crusade, a figure emerged from the shadows of Terra with a vision unlike any other. The Emperor, as he would come to be known, was a being of unparalleled psychic power, intelligence, and ambition. His goal was ambitious and ruthless: to unite all of humanity under a single rule, abolishing the shackles of superstition, religion, and internal conflict. He dreamed of a galaxy-spanning Imperium where humanity would be safe from alien threats, unified by logic and reason, and above all, self-sufficient, needing no gods, for they were falsehoods in his view. It was a vision as glorious as it was severe, and in those early days, he was not yet the god he would later be worshipped as, but a king of reason and ruthless order. At the Emperor's side stood his sons, the Primarchs, each a genetically engineered warlord of immense skill and power, created to be his generals and governors across the stars. Together, they led the Imperium's armies to reclaim humanity's scattered colonies. These genetically enhanced warriors were instruments of conquest, but also symbols of unity, a hope that humans could transcend their limitations through strength and purpose. Yet, from the very start, cracks in this idealistic foundation were visible, hidden behind the Emperor's towering presence. Each Primarch had his own interpretation of the Emperor's vision, embodying virtues or vices that would shape their destinies and the fate of the Imperium. The Emperor's dream, however, was not to last. At the height of the Great Crusade, a harrowing betrayal shattered the golden vision. His favored son, Horus, manipulated by dark forces lurking within the warp, the realm of psychic energy and malevolent chaos, turned against him. The Horus heresy that followed became a catastrophic civil war, pitting brother against brother, loyalist against traitor. The war left the Imperium scarred and shattered, and the Emperor, critically wounded by Horus himself, was entombed on the Golden Throne, a life support machine that kept his dying form alive and his psychic presence strong enough to guide humanity's ships through the warp. With the Emperor incapacitated, the Imperium was thrown into an existential crisis. In his absence, the ideals that had once driven the Imperium forward gave way to paranoia, fanaticism, and rigid dogma. Those closest to him, his custodes, the newly formed Inquisition, and other high-ranking officials, interpreted his will as divine law, creating a cult of worship around the Emperor. What had once been a beacon of reason and enlightenment transformed into a theocratic state ruled by fear, secrecy, and brutal discipline. The Imperium was no longer a dream of unity and peace. It became a dystopian fortress, ever vigilant against threats from within and without. The Ecclesiarchy, an organization responsible for maintaining the Imperium's new, fanatical faith, rose in power. They preached that the Emperor was a god, and that humanity's survival relied on absolute faith in his divinity. What had been, under the Emperor's vision, a society of reason became one ruled by an iron hand, demanding unquestioning loyalty and adherence to religious dogma. The imperial truth, a doctrine meant to free humanity from superstition, was replaced by a zealotry that condemned heretics, mutants, and those who questioned the faith. Entire worlds burned to prevent spiritual contamination from warp-born heresy, and entire populations vanished in purges ordered by an unseen and unanswerable power. The transformation extended to the very institutions created to protect humanity. The Adeptus Custodes, once the Emperor's silent guardians, now patrolled his throne room, enforcing his supposed will as interpreted by the High Priest of Terra. But none wielded as much power as the Inquisition. Formed in the wake of the heresy, the Inquisition became a network of clandestine agents who answered to no one, driven by a singular mandate: to preserve the Imperium at any cost. They rooted out heretics, Xeno-sympathizers, and those dabbling in the forbidden arts of the warp. Often working in the shadows, their methods included interrogation, manipulation, and, when necessary, extermination. They were judge, jury, and executioner, operating under the belief that only ruthless purity could safeguard the Imperium from threats both internal and external. Beneath the grand structures of the Imperium, darker, more secretive practices emerged to maintain control. The Officio Assassinorum, a branch of silent killers, conducted assassinations on those deemed too influential or subversive to the imperial creed. Trained from childhood in various methods of murder and subterfuge, these assassins embodied the ruthless pragmatism that had become central to the Imperium's identity. No one was beyond their reach, not even planetary governors or military leaders, should they stray from the path set by the Terran hierarchy. Where once humanity had sought to cast off the bonds of superstition and fear, it now leaned into them as a means of control. The Primarchs, the Emperor's own sons, had become either myths or cautionary tales, their fates shaped by their tragic roles in the heresy. The imperial truth that had fueled the Great Crusade was buried under centuries of blood-soaked faith, its original tenets forgotten, replaced by a dogma that demanded sacrifice without question. Thus, the Imperium of man became a contradiction, surviving on a foundation of ideals it had long since abandoned. It demanded loyalty but gave no trust, promising salvation through an emperor who no longer spoke. Its existence required a constant cycle of control, repression, and faith, a labyrinthine system where secrets were kept not to protect humanity, but to keep it obedient and fearful. And at its core lay the greatest irony. The emperor, the man who had fought to free humanity from superstition, had been enshrined as the god of a galaxy-spanning cult that twisted his ideals beyond recognition. As the Imperium stretched itself across the stars, its survival depended on the very tactics it had once sought to eradicate. The pursuit of reason and unity had given way to a brutal theocracy that worshipped a silent god. It was a dark path, one paved with the sacrifices of millions who would never know the truth behind the Imperium's facade, and one that cast a long shadow over all who dared to question its methods. But beneath the surface, whispers of rebellion and lost ideals lingered, and as the Imperium tightened its grip, the seeds of doubt began to grow in the minds of those who saw beyond the veil. This was the Imperium, a place where survival trumped truth, where every action carried a hidden motive, and where the dark secrets of the past lay buried, ready to rise. And for those within its grasp, there would be no choice but to fight or to surrender, both paths leading inevitably into the shadows of a relentless and unforgiving empire. The Inquisition, a shadowy institution feared even by the highest ranks within the Imperium, had one grim purpose: to protect humanity by any means necessary. Unseen by the masses, its agents, the Inquisitors, acted as silent wardens of the Imperium, authorized to root out heresy, corruption, and threats beyond human understanding. They moved through the layers of imperial society with unyielding authority, needing no permission to act, wielding a mandate that could bring down governors, armies, even entire worlds. Yet for all their power, they operated in near isolation, driven by their own judgments, guided by a doctrine that blended fanaticism with unsparing pragmatism. Chief among the Inquisition's ranks was Lord Inquisitor Victor Rael, a figure both feared and revered within the Ordo Hereticus, the branch of the Inquisition devoted to rooting out heresy. Rael was a man of iron will, molded by years of battling the Imperium's most insidious enemies. Scarred from decades of conflict with rogue psychers and cult leaders, he had witnessed the depths of corruption within the Imperium firsthand. His methods were brutal but effective, and his devotion to the emperors was bordered on zealotry. Rael believed that mercy was weakness, and only those willing to sacrifice anything in the emperor's name were fit to bear the title of Inquisitor. It was a belief that drove him to trust few and doubt many, making him a solitary figure within his own ranks. As Lord Rael navigated the labyrinthine halls of the Inquisition's headquarters on Terra, he summoned his protege, Inquisitor Sarah Cade. Cade was new to the Ordo Hereticus, but her sharp intellect and fierce dedication had earned Rael's respect. In her, he saw a mind that could comprehend the complexities of the Inquisition's work and a heart hardened enough to endure the sacrifices required. Where Rael's fervor sometimes bordered on cruelty, Cade harbored a quiet empathy, a resolve tempered by an understanding of the very human cost of their mission. Though she lacked Rael's uncompromising zeal, her loyalty was unshakable, and she believed deeply in the necessity of the Inquisition's work, even if it meant tarnishing her soul in the process. Rael called Cade into his chamber to brief her on a new assignment, one that spoke to the very heart of the Imperium's survival. They had received intelligence of a cult, a powerful coven of warp worshippers rumored to operate within the highest echelons of Imperial nobility. They called themselves the Sons of Deliverance, a group whose members dabbled in forbidden sorcery, invoking powers that corrupted the mind and twisted the soul. Worse, their influence had spread to imperial governors, military officers, and the upper aristocracy. The Sons of Deliverance didn't simply worship chaos. They sought to undermine the Imperium from within, spreading whispers of rebellion and doubt. "Do you understand the gravity of this mission, Inquisitor Cade?" Rael's voice was steely as he handed her the dossier. "This is no ordinary heretical gathering. We are facing a threat that has infected the Imperium's very core. You must root it out without hesitation." Cade scanned the dossier, noting the names of governors and military officials suspected of allegiance to the cult. The Sons of Deliverance were not just any cabal. They had managed to sway individuals with considerable power, suggesting an influence beyond mere seduction. Her stomach twisted. She knew this assignment would demand ruthless action, perhaps even destruction on a planetary scale. Yet Rael's eyes were unwavering, his expression as impassive as stone. For him, there was no cost too high when it came to preserving the Imperium. The conflict between Rael's unyielding dogma and Cade's tempered approach soon became evident. Rael advocated for immediate and sweeping action. Purges, the use of the Officio Assassinorum to eliminate key figures, and, if necessary, an exterminatus, a catastrophic order to obliterate a world entirely. Cade, however, believed there was another way. She proposed infiltrating the cult, unraveling its inner network, and gathering enough evidence to surgically remove its members without indiscriminate slaughter. Rael's brow furrowed. "You think you can strike at the heart of this corruption without shedding blood, Inquisitor Cade? This is not a courtroom. These people have forsaken their humanity to serve the warp. Any sign of weakness will be their advantage." Cade met his gaze, unflinching. "I do not advocate mercy, Lord Rael. I merely suggest precision. If we obliterate entire systems to eliminate these cultists, we risk making martyrs of them, sowing seeds of doubt among those who remain loyal." Rael considered her words, his expression darkening as he weighed her suggestion. It was not in his nature to hesitate, yet he recognized the strength in her argument. The Inquisition's work was as much about perception as it was about action. And though Rael was not one to question the necessity of sacrifices, he knew that the Imperium relied on more than fear alone. It needed loyalty, however tenuous. After a long pause, he spoke. "Very well, Inquisitor Cade, you may proceed with your method, but remember, if you fail, the price will not only be your life but the security of the Imperium itself. We cannot afford half measures." Cade nodded, fully aware of the stakes. Under the guise of a high-ranking noble, she infiltrated the Sons of Deliverance, attending secret gatherings held in darkened cathedrals and hearing whispers of rebellion against the Emperor's will. She observed the cultist rituals, their words laced with blasphemy, their beliefs a poison meant to tear the Imperium apart. The experience was harrowing, testing her resolve as she endured their twisted teachings and waited for the right moment to strike. After weeks embedded in their ranks, she gathered enough evidence to expose the cult's leadership. With calculated precision, she orchestrated simultaneous strikes on the key figures, coordinating with loyal Imperial Guard regiments and calling upon the deadly efficiency of the Vindicare assassins. In one night, the Sons of Deliverance were gutted, their leaders eliminated in a swift, silent purge. Not a single civilian knew of the battle that had raged in the shadows, and to the public, the nobility's corrupted hearts had been cut out without the need for massive bloodshed. When she returned to Rael, her face was lined with exhaustion, but her eyes burned with the satisfaction of a mission completed. Rael acknowledged her success with a rare hint of approval, yet he remained cold. To him, it was merely one battle in an endless war, a temporary reprieve in an Imperium rife with corruption. "You did well, Inquisitor," he said, "but never forget, victory is fleeting. Corruption seeps in where vigilance falters. The next time we strike, We may not have the luxury of such precision. Cade accepted his words, feeling the weight of her duty settle even heavier on her shoulders. She knew that, for the Inquisition, there would always be another cult, another threat, another secret to bury. The Imperium's survival depended on their ruthless vigilance. And while Rael's path was one of merciless resolve, Cade's loyalty was forged in quiet determination, a delicate balance between duty and humanity. As she left Rael's chambers, she realized that her role would forever be in shadow, a life bound to an empire of secrets and lies, fighting enemies that few could even fathom. And though her mission was complete, she knew her path was only beginning, stretching into an uncertain future where every victory came at a price, and where mercy would remain forever a temptation she could not afford. Few within the Imperium truly understand the warp. To most, it is merely the medium through which ships travel, a strange and unstable dimension that connects distant stars. But to those who wield its power or are cursed by it, the warp is a place of horrors, home to beings of malevolent intellect and insatiable hunger. The warp was both the Imperium's greatest asset and its most fearsome curse. It was this dimension of chaos that made interstellar travel possible, yet it exacted a heavy toll on those who dared to use it. For those closest to this terror, there was no escape from its influence. Chief among them was Malleus High Inquisitor Conrad Thorn, a man deeply scarred by his years combating the entities within the warp. Where others saw mere superstition, Thorn understood the terrible truth. The warp was alive, teeming with gods and demons who sought to corrupt and consume humanity's souls. It was a revelation he had discovered at the cost of his innocence, a lesson carved into his mind as he watched entire planets fall under the sway of chaos. The High Inquisitor was tasked with overseeing the Imperium's most secretive program, a responsibility that weighed on him like the chains of a prisoner. He bore the duty of selecting those marked as psychers, humans gifted or perhaps cursed with the ability to manipulate the warp. Every year, thousands of these psychers were shipped to Terra, forcibly torn from their lives and condemned to a fate that was as critical as it was tragic, to be consumed by the Astronomicon. Thorn had long accepted the necessity of their sacrifice. It was a grim cost, but without it, the guiding light of the Astronomicon would fail, and the Imperium ships would be lost, stranded across the stars without hope of returning home. One morning, as he overlooked the intake of psychers from his station on Terra, Thorn noticed a new batch arriving. Among them was a young girl named Leora, no older than 16, with a gaze that burned with an intensity rare among those brought here. Thorn had long since steeled himself against the human cost of his work, but Leora's eyes unsettled him. They held no fear, only a quiet resignation and a startling clarity, as if she understood the enormity of her fate. He knew that within days, she would join the ranks of those sacrificed to sustain the Emperor's psychic beacon, her essence feeding the Astronomicon so that others might survive. Why must we be the ones to do this? She asked him that evening, her voice carrying a weight beyond her years. Thorn, though accustomed to such questions, found himself momentarily lost for words. He could have given her the standard reply, that her sacrifice would ensure the Imperium's continued existence, that it was her duty to the Emperor and all of humanity. But he sensed that this answer would mean little to her. Instead, he told her the truth. The warp is a place of endless darkness, and those who wield its power carry that darkness within them. The Emperor, in his strength, keeps the warp at bay for us, but he needs souls to fuel his light. Without you, without every one of those who have come before, humanity would be swallowed by the endless night. Leora absorbed his words with a steady calm. If I don't do this, others will suffer, she said quietly. But why do we never speak of this? Why is it a secret? Thorn's gaze hardened. Because few would understand. The Imperium depends on strength, on unity. To reveal the true horror of the warp would sow fear, and fear is the breeding ground of chaos. We must be the ones to bear this burden. We must be the ones who know. That night, as Leora joined the ranks of the Chosen, Thorn felt the weight of his purpose crush him anew. He knew that even after her essence was drawn into the Astronomicon, another would come, and another, an endless line of sacrifices to keep the light alive. But he also understood that their fates were the price of survival. This was the reality of the Imperium's continued existence. A fortress built on secrets, its foundation stained by the blood of its own people. Beyond the Astronomicon and its grim cost lay another of humanity's hidden defenders, the Grey Knights, a brotherhood of space marines formed solely to combat the demonic entities that slithered from the warp. Few within the Imperium even knew of their existence, and those who did knew better than to speak of them. Grey Knights were psychers themselves, bound by unbreakable vows and trained in silence to be the Emperor's ultimate weapon against the creatures of chaos. They operated in secrecy, for their existence alone would cause terror in the hearts of ordinary citizens. For the truth of the warp, in all its maddening horror, was a secret better left unknown. The leader of these knights was Brother Captain Darius, a warrior who had faced countless demons and survived. His armor bore the marks of battles unseen by mortal eyes. Yet his face was unscarred, maintained by psychic fortifications that allowed him to resist the warp's touch. He carried within him knowledge of horrors that few could comprehend. For Darius and his brothers, there was no glory, only an unending duty to hold back the tide of chaos that threatened to engulf all of humanity. One night, Thorn met with Darius, seeking advice on a rising threat, a cult rumored to have direct connections to the chaos gods themselves. The cult had grown more brazen, and the Inquisition feared it might open a portal, unleashing a demon host that would devastate a sector. Thorn's gaze was heavy as he explained the cult's ambitions. His own weariness mirrored in Darius's eyes. "We live in service to a dying empire," Darius said, his voice as steady as the steel in his hands. "But while we live, we protect. The Imperium may fall, but it will not fall to this. Not while we stand." And in that moment, Thorn found a bitter solace. He knew that his work, the sacrifices of countless psychers, and the silent battles fought by warriors like Darius, all of it was to buy humanity a few more moments of survival, a few more breaths of fragile peace. As he returned to his chamber that night, Thorn looked once more at the stars through his window. He thought of Leora, her essence now a part of the Astronomicon's light, and wondered if her soul lingered there, guiding others to safety. He wondered if one day the Imperium's leaders would have the courage to speak the truth about the warp and the sacrifices demanded by its darkness. But he knew that day would never come. The Imperium's survival was too delicate, its citizens too fragile to withstand such knowledge. And so, the secrets of the warp would remain in the shadows, known only to those willing to pay the price for humanity's fleeting hope.